So we come to the end of the course, and all roads lead to Jerusalem. So we're going to take everything we've learned so far and combine it into a narrative about today and the future. So the grand thesis of this class is that secret societies control the world. And this is something you can never prove, okay? But let me propose a theory of how we can approach the truth, okay? Theory of truth. If you have a theory or an idea or a narrative, and it does these three things, then it approaches the truth. The first is that it connects the past. Okay? So does it help us put the past, things that we know that happened in the past, into a coherent story that we can understand? Okay, that's test number one. Test number two is it explains the present. Does it help us better understand the world we live in? Okay? And the last and the most important is predicts the future. From this narrative, we should be able to make certain predictions about how events should develop. And if these events turn out to happen the way we predict, then we can be more sure that our theory of truth is correct. Now, let's be extremely precise. Just because things turn out the way that we predict doesn't necessarily mean that our theory is 100% correct, okay? Because it's really important to understand that correlation does not necessarily mean causation. Okay? So that's a caveat. No matter how well we predict the future, it doesn't necessarily mean that our theory is 100% correct. But our theory gives us a model to understand the past, the present, and the future. Okay? So, with very little evidence, I'm going to present to you a theory about how the world works. A story about how we got to where we are. And again, this is speculation. Some will call this conspiracy theory. And this is just meant to be a fun class. So take what I say with a grain of salt, okay? Ask good questions, doubt what I say, but what I'll show you is that this theory, even though it doesn't really make much sense and you may not believe it, it does help us connect the past, explain the present, and predict the future, okay? All right, so without further ado, let's go into this theory. So you remember Jacob Frank, who founded the Sabbatean Frankist movement, okay? And he will convert to the Catholic religion, and he will encourage his followers to also follow him into the Catholic religion and also to infiltrate secret societies. One of his friends, one of his patrons, is Mayer Rothschild, who is founder, of course, of the Rothschild banking dynasty, which we discussed last class. He will introduce Jacob Frank to another person named Adam Weishaupt in Bavaria, okay, in present-day Germany. All right, now Adam Weishaupt, he is actually a former Jesuit, okay? So he's a member of the Catholic Church. He's also a Jew, okay? And again, we don't have any evidence that these three actually know each other. But this is a theory, all right? So let's assume they knew each other. What they will do together is create a new organization called the Illuminati. And this organization is what controls the world, the Illuminati. Now, there is a legend that Adam Weishaupt, after he created the Illuminati, he encouraged his followers to infiltrate another organization called the Freemasons. And these were extremely prominent members of European society. Okay, these were intellectuals like Goethe, these were nobility, these were bankers. And so this is the framework that controls the world, okay? The Illuminati was able to penetrate the Freemasons, so now you have an alliance of the Jesuits, the Jews, the Septentine Frankists, the Catholics, and the Freemasons, okay? And so this is the alliance of secret societies. Now, there is a legend that what happened is that Adam Weishaupt, he was eventually arrested for conspiracy by the authorities. And so the organization, the Illuminati, has been disbanded. It no longer exists. But there are others who argue that's not what happened. In fact, it was Adam Weishaupt himself who spread the legend that there was a secret organization called the Illuminati. Okay? So the entire thing was to generate publicity. But in reality, the Illuminati was not disbanded, and it still exists today. So why would they do this? And the reason why is that secret societies, like every organization, depends on publicity for recruitment. Okay? So it's free publicity if you read in a newspaper that there's a secret organization that's trying to conquer the world and which the authorities don't like. Then a lot of people will be like, how do I join this organization? Right? And that's what happened. All right? So the irony about secret societies is they have a structure, which is like a triangle, okay? At the very top is the leadership. This leadership is secret. You don't know who they are. You don't know what they do, okay? But they usually come from very noble families. We call these the 13 families, okay? Then at the very bottom are just the public members. And they think that what they do is just good stuff, okay? So the Freemasons, they actually don't know what the leadership does. The key is the middle management. These people, okay? These people are the ones who do all the work. And these people are selected for ambition. In other words, for power, they're willing to sell their souls. All right? Okay. So when you have different secret societies together, a major problem that you have is coordination. And the idea here is you have different leaders, and how do you get them to work together? Also, after these leaders die, how do you ensure that the new leaders will coordinate together? And the answer to this problem is the idea of eschatology. Okay, we'll discuss eschatology. But eschatology comes from the Greek word eschaton, which means the end. So eschatology means your understanding of how the world ends, of how to create paradise on earth. And what I will show you is that even though these different groups have different eschatologies, there are convergence points which allows them to work together. Okay? So let's go over the major eschatologies. And remember, what's really important to understand is that these eschatologies are often secret. They sometimes change, and the details will be different. So I'm going to present to you more or less a general understanding of different eschatologies, okay? So let's start with the easiest, which is a Jewish eschatology. What do the Jews believe? Well, the Jews believe that because they disobeyed God, because they worship false idols, because they sinned, they were expelled by God from their homeland, Jerusalem, to wander the earth, which creates the Jewish diaspora. But eventually what will happen is that a Jewish Messiah will emerge to take the Jews back to Jerusalem, okay? And he will reconstitute the nation of Israel. He will recreate Israel, and then he will rebuild Solomon's temple. Why? Because Solomon's temple is where God lives. And it is where the people of Israel make sacrifices to Yahweh in order to show their devotion to Yahweh. So Solomon's temple is really important. There will be something called the War of Gog and Magog, where basically the entire world unites against Israel. Okay? And the War of Gog and Magog will be led by the Antichrist, the anti-Messiah, the false prophet. We don't know what Gog and Magog represent, okay? What the Bible says is these are people from the north, but that could mean anyone. And certain Jewish scholars have interpreted Gog and Magog to represent Russia and Iran. Okay? This is important because of what's happening today. Okay? But of course, when it seems as though the enemies of Israel, Gog and Magog, when it seems that they are about to win, God will intervene and ensure that Israel wins. And this will usher in something called the Messianic age, when Israel becomes the most dominant nation on earth, when it becomes the light of nations, when it becomes the light of the world. Okay? Does that make sense? So that is the Jewish eschatology. And most Jews believe this. Then you have the Frankists. Okay? And the Frankists, Sabbatine Frankists, they make important changes to this eschatology. Okay? The first important change is the Jews believe that the Messiah will come when the time is right. So most rabbis believe that the Messiah will come in the year 6000 in the Jewish calendar, which is about the year 2040, 2040 in our calendar, which is about 200 years later. Okay, so still a long time away. But the Frankists believe that the Messiah has already come, right? Sometimes Zevi, and then you have Jacob Frank. So they believe that, first of all, the Messiah is already here, okay, which means that the war can start. Second thing that they believe is that you don't wait for God to intervene. You can accelerate the Messianic age by sinning, right? Because by sinning, what you're doing is you are defying Satan. It's Satan who created this world. And by sinning, you're defying his laws, you're defying his authority, and this will create more chaos, and you will reveal how evil this world is. You will accelerate the collapse, okay, which will force God to intervene. And then during the Messianic age, what will happen is material pleasure. Okay, so rather than everyone being spiritually pure, we'll have a lot of sex. We will have feast. We will live forever. Okay? That's a Frankist interpretation of this eschatology. Okay? Does that make sense? Then you have the Christian Zionists. Okay? The Christian Zionists. I'll explain who the Christian Zionists are later on, okay? But what the Christian Zionists will do is they will take this Jewish eschatology but interpret it in a Christian context, okay? So for the Christians, they believe that yes, all this will happen, okay? The Jews will establish their Messianic age. But this is really the Antichrist system. Okay? The Antichrist, who is the Jewish Messiah, will establish a world government that will dominate the world. And he will establish something called the Mark of the Beast. Mark of the Beast is basically digital ID. Okay? So just think of a microchip in your forehead or wherever that, and so you can be tracked, you can be monitored. Okay? So basically an AI surveillance system. Okay? So this is what the Messianic age of the Jews will look like, but it's the Antichrist system. And eventually what will happen is that the people will rebel against Israel, and this will lead to something called the War of Gog and Magog. Okay? And when it seems as though Israel is about to be defeated in the battle of Armageddon, okay, what will happen is that Jesus will return. Jesus will return, second coming, and he will take all the Christians to heaven. It's called the rapture. And then he will kill a third of the Jews, a third will convert, and this will usher the Messianic age, okay? So this is the Christian interpretation. It's called Christian Zionism. But as you can see, what's really important is the Jews first achieve their eschatology before the Christians can achieve theirs. The Christians need to use the Jews as a tool to achieve the second coming. Okay? Does that make sense? All right. And what's really important is Solomon's temple. Solomon's temple is where the Al-Aqsa Mosque is right now. So in other words, for this eschatology to happen, you will need to destroy the Al-Aqsa Mosque, which is the third holiest site in the Islamic world. And you can imagine how angry Muslims will be. And this might initiate the war of Gog and Magog. Okay? Another important thing about this eschatology that's really important is you need the Jews to return to Israel. And how do you get the Jews to return to Israel? Anti-Semitism. Okay? So not only do you have to destroy the Al-Aqsa Mosque, which is, not very nice, but you also have to promote anti-Semitism around the world to force the Jews to return. That's another part of this plan. Okay? As you can see, this is not a nice plan. It causes a lot of death, it causes a lot of suffering, causes a lot of persecution, but both Jews and Christians believe that for the Messianic age to come, there has to be an age of tribulation, there has to be the Antichrist, there has to be the war of Gog and Magog. Okay, there has to be Armageddon, basically. All right, so is this making sense? Okay, this is again the eschatology, which is a script, which is a plan that these secret societies must implement in order to achieve heaven on earth. The last people I want to talk about are the Freemasons. Okay, the Freemasons believe that they are. The Freemasons believe that they are of the Enlightenment. Okay. Freemasons. They practice a new philosophy called deism. What makes deism different is that it's an Enlightenment philosophy. So the idea is that God did create the world, the universe. That's why we are here. But then God left. And now, because of free will, free choice, we can do whatever we want. Okay? And our mission is basically to achieve godhood through science, through open debate, through rational thinking. And what are the signs of godhood? How do we know that we've become God? When we're able to do three things, okay? The first thing is to warp reality. Okay? To basically manipulate the essence of matter. And we've been able to do that because of something called the nuclear bomb. Right? So we've achieved that. So in other words, the nuclear bomb was a Freemason project to achieve godhood. But not only that, after they achieved the nuclear bomb, they had to use it to show that they are God, right? Because as we discussed before, at the end of World War II, the Americans were firebombing Japan. The war was over. They didn't have to drop the bomb, but they dropped the bomb on Hiroshima and Nagasaki. Okay? That's number one. Number two is they need to kill a king to show that they are God. Because the king is divinity, right? God gives birth to kings, only gods can kill a king. And who did they kill? JFK. Okay, again, this is conspiracy theory, okay? And the third thing, which a God does, is create life. Okay? And this is something that they haven't done yet. But we can imagine what this is. This is AI. Okay? So these are the three missions of the Freemasons. And they've achieved the first two. They've warped reality by creating a nuclear bomb. They've killed the king, JFK. And the third thing they want to do is create life, which is AI. Okay? In fact, we can also guess where this AI will take place. Why? Because let's look at a map. Okay? Let's look at a map. This is the equator. 33 degrees north of the equator are 4 places. Okay? Now 33 degrees is very important in Freemasonry. There are 33 degrees in Scottish Rite Freemasonry. It's a very sacred number. All right? So 33 degrees north of the equator, you have 4 places. The first place is Trinity Site, New Mexico in America, which is where they tested the atomic bomb. Okay? You go over across the Pacific to Japan, 33 degrees north is Hiroshima and Nagasaki. All right? 33 degrees north in America is Dallas, Texas, where they killed JFK. So the last mission of Freemasons to achieve their vision for the world is creating AI, right? Now the question is, where would they do it? And the answer is 33 degrees north of the equator, right? And where is that? Jerusalem. So this is the end game, guys. The Freemasons will create artificial intelligence in Jerusalem, and this will become the world government. Again, this is just conspiracy theory. Don't believe this. This is just for fun, okay? But if it happens like this, then that's interesting, okay? But that is the grand plan, to create a world government in Jerusalem. And where's the center of this world government? Solomon's Temple. Because the Freemasons believe that their founder was the one who created Solomon's Temple. So by recreating Solomon's Temple, you close the circle, okay? So again, this is very complicated, and I don't want to get too many things wrong, but this is the general gist of it. And so what we can see is that all roads lead to Jerusalem. Now that is the case, okay, then this helps us understand certain things about the world that otherwise don't make any sense. All right, so let's go over them. The first thing that doesn't make any sense is America's war on terror. Yes, I understand that America was attacked on 9/11. I understand that. But why did that go attack Libya and Iraq and all these other places that had nothing to do with Al-Qaeda? Okay? And the answer is they're trying to create something called the Greater Israel Project. They're trying to have Israel become Pax Judaica, the grand power in the Middle East, because that's important in all secret societies. Israel must become the dominant power in the Middle East, okay? So this helps us understand why the War of Terror happened the way it did. That's number one. Number two is, right now, America is threatening to attack Iran. Why would they do that? Because in order for Pax Judaica to come into being, Iran must be taken out of the equation. Iran must be destroyed. Then, if that were to happen, there would be no challenger to the power of Pax Judaica, okay? Does that make sense? All right? The third thing is Silicon Valley and AI. So right now, you have AI, ChatGPT, which doesn't really do anything, okay? It makes cool images on your computer and helps you cheat in school, okay? That's about it. It doesn't really do anything else. And if you don't go to school, then you're like, why am I using ChatGPT? Okay? And you're not going to pay a lot of money for it. So AI, it's a dead end. But at the same time, all around the world, everyone's spending billions, trillions of dollars on data centers, right? So everyone's putting money into AI. But then you're like, well, how can you make money off that? If you think the answer is for you to use AI, well, it's hard to make money off that. But if the answer is to create an AI surveillance state, that makes a lot more sense, right? So what is a surveillance state? Very easy, guys. We have it in China, okay? It's digital ID and digital currency. And the idea is that everything you buy, everything you do will be tracked. And so they can create a profile on you. This profile will tell the government who you are, how you behave, what you think. Not only that, the government can also manipulate how you think, how you behave. Okay? And this is, of course, called the mark of the beast. Right? And so that's what Pax Judaica is. Pax Judaica is a global AI surveillance system. Okay? It also helps us explain immigration in Europe. Okay? Because the war on terror, you've sent these millions of refugees from Libya, Syria, Afghanistan, Iraq into Europe, which is causing a lot of conflict in Europe. Why would that happen? Well, for Pax Judaica to come into being, you need to destroy the world. Okay? So, I'm not saying this is true, but I'm saying like, if the goal is Pax Judaica, it does help us connect the dots. It helps us explain why things are happening the way they are. Okay? Also, the last thing is anti-Semitism, okay? So you may have noticed, if you're online, people don't like the Jews. And this is like out of nowhere. After October 7th, you have anti-Semitism over the internet. Now, I have criticized Israel before, okay? But anti-Semitism is not the same thing as anti-Zionism, right? Zionism is the belief that Israel is a chosen people and the promised land and all that, okay? But Judaism as religion, it's perfectly fine. So why would people not care about the difference between anti-Zionism and anti-Semitism, okay? And you can argue it's all purposeful because remember, the part of the plan is to force the Jews to return to Israel. That's very important for this plan to work out, okay? It's key. That's why you are seeing so much anti-Semitism around the world today. Okay? And the last thing, of course, and this is something we'll discuss, is something called the red heifers. So red heifers are red cows that are perfectly genetically modified. And you need the red heifers in order to, you have to sacrifice the red heifers to purify the ground in order to reconstruct the Solomon's temple, okay? And guess what? They've already sacrificed the red heifers. So it seems as though everything is in place. All right? They're moving towards Pax Judaica. All right. So let's discuss what will happen in the short term and in the long term if Pax Judaica really is the end goal, okay? So when you have Israel fighting wars everywhere, okay? The main enemy right now is Iran. In Europe, you have the Europeans about to go to war with Russia in Ukraine. America right now is threatening to attack Venezuela, okay? South America. You have 10% of the US Navy in the Caribbean, and they're about to attack Venezuela. You have China and Japan at conflict. You have India here, and you have Africa, okay? So what's going to happen in the short term? Okay, well, what we know is that Europe is planning to go to war with Russia. Okay? Europe is about to go to war with Russia, okay? At the same time, you have a lot of immigrants in Europe. And this is going to create civil wars in Europe. Okay, civil war. So you have both war with Russia as well as civil war. So Europe is kind of screwed, okay? America has the same situation where the left-right divide is so polarized that eventually they'll go to war. If you read the news, you may have heard about the shootings at Brown University, as well as this MIT physicist who were shot, okay? So random violence will be more and more common in the United States. And you can argue that's all deliberate because the idea is this. Let's just say you have a jar. You put red ants in a jar and black ants in a jar. They get along fine. But you take the jar and you just shake it up, and now they're at war with each other, okay? That's what's happening where the left and right, they really don't like each other. They don't talk to each other, and they refuse to engage in debate with each other. But they're not going to fight each other unless there's violence. In which case, their tribal mentality takes over and they start killing each other, okay? So we can expect civil war in the United States. Then you're gonna have the Americans start to attack Venezuela and possibly other countries in South America. So America is in for a bad time, okay? China, yeah, I mean, Japan and China and India, they're all gonna have conflicts with each other. But also what we should expect is that America starts to embargo China, meaning America uses its sea power to block China from accessing resources from overseas. And China imports most of its oil and a lot of its food. So if there's a blockade of China, you can expect the Chinese economy to really suffer, okay? All right, and then what we can expect to happen is America at some point will go to war with Iran, and this will destroy both countries, okay? Iran will not lose this war, but it won't win this war either because America is just gonna bomb the crap out of Iran. It's just gonna send Iran back decades. But America will lose this war, but this is important because if America loses this war, it's forced out of the Middle East. And once it's forced out of the Middle East, all its military assets goes to Israel, which creates the Pax Judaica. Does that make sense, guys? That's the plan. Okay, now you have Pax Judaica. And what Pax Judaica will do is start to control the world. Because through chaos and conflict, Pax Judaica can make a lot of money, right? Because Pax Judaica, what's going to happen is that you have these technology companies like Google, they're going to move over to Pax Judaica and build a global surveillance state. You have civil wars, you need AI to control people. If you're going to war with Russia, you need weapons, okay? But you also need financing as well. So you can expect a lot of banks to move to Israel, and it's possible Israel becomes now the global reserve currency because everyone is trading with Israel. If you're Russia, you need to trade with, you need to trade your resources, right? Oil, energy, and grain, okay? So Russia controls a third of the world's carbohydrates. Guess what, guys? Israel controls Africa. So what will happen is that Russia and other countries will sign a trade agreement with Israel, and Israel becomes the center of global trade. Okay? Does that make sense? So this is how Pax Judaica will profit. And remember that Israel has the world's best intelligence agency, the Mossad. And what they can do is go around the world and create as much chaos as possible. Okay? So while the world is burning, Israel, Pax Judaica, is profiting. And that's what the future looks like for the next 10, 20 years. And this will, of course, lead to the rise of the Antichrist, who will take control of Pax Judaica and force the world to eventually attack Israel in something called the War of Gog and Magog. And this will, of course, lead to the second coming of Jesus. So that's a grand plan, okay? All right? Any questions? Does it make sense to you guys? I know it's evil, and you know what? I could be a complete idiot, okay? I could just making all this up. But you have to ask yourself 3 questions. Does it connect the past? Does it explain what's happened in the past? Does it explain what's happening today? And will these things happen in the future, okay? So we haven't lived through the future yet, but you can see the trends. Yeah, Vincent? Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. Like you said that AI, they will, God, create lives and create AI at Jerusalem. But I think, ChatGPT, they already create AI in Silicon Valley.
Okay, ChatGPT is not AI. It's an LLM, okay? Artificial intelligence is a thinking, conscious, sentient force. That's like God. So they're trying to create God in Jerusalem, okay? Out of Solomon's temple. Does that make sense? Okay? Any more questions before we go to the PPT? But you guys understand what's happening, right? Okay, let's go to PPT.